Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, it's always good to see a room which has a lot of women in it. So a big round of applause definitely for the women in the house, especially when considering that this is more of a logistics event. It's always good to see a lot of female faces in the crowd. Um, I'm Nirav Kothari. I head the industrial services business for Jones Lang LaSalle in India. And Jones Lang LaSalle essentially is a real estate advisory firm based out of the US. In India, we have been here since 1996. And we are essentially known for all the services that we render to most of the developer community, the government, and private equity funds. So what is a real estate guy doing in a logistics event? Well, most of the functions that you carry out are done out of a warehouse or a fulfillment center, as it is called for e-commerce companies. And that's what me and my team strive to deliver to our clients, people like Flipkart, Snapdeal, DHL, FedEx of the world. So that's the real estate angle that I bring to this forum. I put together a small presentation on what attributes and what things go into finalizing a location for setting up a fulfillment center or a warehouse, if you want to call it that way. So that's what I'm going to talk about over the next 10 minutes or so. Broadly divided into 3 or 4 sections, and what are the destinations in the country working today and things like that, and what are the typologies and attributes that one should look at. So you would have been hearing about the e-commerce business and how it's growing over the last quite a few number of years. As per the recent survey done by ASSOCHAM, it's at about 17 billion US dollars, and it is expected to go to somewhere around 38 billion US dollars. I think the slide doesn't show that. There's some issue with that. But roughly about 23% of all warehousing space that has been delivered in the country over the last few years has been taken up by e-commerce companies. So, if you look at the traditional companies like FMCG, auto, etc., it's e-commerce that's occupying the maximum amount of space that is being built in the country today. And this is only the grade A or the best in-class warehouse quality that I'm talking of, not the low-end stuff that we are talking of. And roughly we expect about 8 to 10 million square feet of warehouse space to be absorbed over the next 2 to 3 years. So we're talking of a humongous amount of space, and given the height that these buildings are delivering, if you look at the cubic feet that the e-commerce industry is going to occupy, that's a very, very big number that we are talking of. Typically, if you look at the warehousing destinations, it is traditionally driven by the e-commerce industry is traditionally driven by consumption centers, and that's where the existing large cities of the country like NCR, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Pune, Calcutta, Hyderabad come into play. But then these are essentially consumption-led centers. So there are places like Varanasi, which serves to UP as a center, but eventually it's expected to grow in a very big way. So these are the locations that are essentially consumption-led. These are the locations which are essentially port-driven. So when we are talking of export and import, so all the locations which are around the major ports of the country today, along with Mundra, which is a private port, these are the locations that one looks at. And then there are facilitator-led locations where the government gives you some special incentives to set up a fulfillment center or some sort of an incentive or some specific infrastructure project that you're looking at. So these are the locations that people look for when you go to an facilitator-led locations. So if I put together all three of them, we are essentially talking of the top 8 cities of the country, followed by the next 4, which are essentially Varanasi, Nagpur, Bhubaneswar, and Guwahati. These are the next 4 cities that people will go to. And when I say people, it's essentially the e-commerce industry that will go uh, to fulfill the demands of the customers from these regions. Of late, we've been getting a lot of queries from our clients to set up a fulfillment center in Guwahati. And if you look at the spending power that the people have in the Northeast, it is a very, very important location for any e-commerce company to set up a fulfillment center there. Uh, we have, and if you look at traditionally how India is developed, it was always on the western seaboard that the development took place. And it is only now that we are looking at the eastern part of the country as an underserved area and looking at developing the infrastructure as well as the supply chain to cater to the eastern part of the country. So going forward, you will always find people asking you for more and more fulfillment space in places like Nagpur, Bhubaneswar, Guwahati, and Banaras for that matter as well. So these are going to be the next 4 destinations we think uh, are going to be the ones that are to look out for. If you have a supply chain which is designed around these 12 locations, within a 12-hour trucking time, you can reach 90% of the spending population of the country. That's the underlying message that is there. If you can reach out to 90% of the spending population in a 12 hours trucking time, you probably cracked your supply chain jigsaw. Why everybody keeps talking of why is location so crucial? Because since morning I've been hearing that people were okay to live with a 7-day delivery timeline, which then came down to 3 days. Today it's 1 day, and we are already talking of same day and a 4-hour delivery timeline. So if the supply chain has to gear up to a 4-hour delivery timeline, then obviously you need to be as close as possible to the customer, and which essentially means that you have to be at a location which is very close to the customer. So how does the supply chain really pan out, and why is location so crucial? So as I mentioned, faster delivery, that's what everybody wants today. And nobody really wants to wait for an order which they have placed and want to wait for 3, 4, 5 days for their order to be fulfilled. Second is warehouses, so which essentially means that warehouses have to be close to demand centers, which is the paying population of the country. And lastly, warehouses should be connected to the network, which is the IT network, and that's how an e-commerce platform will run, and should be optimized for reverse logistics to work as well. Second is, I've been hearing since morning, optimized logistics cost. That's the key to one of the keys, I would like to put it that way, to success in your business. So a supply chain which is designed around an optimized logistics cost is the one that will survive. However, in India, today our entire supply chain is based on trucking or road-based transport, which is in effect the most inefficient way of transporting goods. We definitely need to look at newer and better ways, inland waterways, coastal shipping, and things like that, which the government is working towards to liberalize all of that, and soon you should see a network which is much more efficient to meet your supply chain needs. Third is most of the e-commerce majors agree to that, is availability of skilled labor. So wherever you set up a fulfillment center, skilled labor should be available to work on fulfilling those orders. especially during the festival peaks. Because during a festival peak, you have in excess of 1,000, 1,100 people working in a 100,000 square feet box, which is essentially very crowded. And lastly, GST, that's essentially a bill which is going to be passed hopefully in the monsoon session of the parliament in a couple of months. So that once it's passed, the whole the entire premise on which our logistic architecture is designed is supposed to change. So it's going to be least logistic cost which is going to drive it, and not the state laws or state taxation laws that is going to drive the supply chain, which is an efficient way of running a supply chain. So if we talk of e-commerce warehousing typologies, you essentially have a mother hub or a fulfillment center, as most of them call it. These are essentially large boxes which start from 100,000 square feet and go up to 600, 700,000 square feet. We're already doing something for a client of ours wherein the fulfillment center is supposed to be of a size of 1 million square feet. That is going to be the largest box in the country today, and it will fulfill a massive number of orders going forward from a single roof, which is very, very critical. So you'll save a lot of costs running multiple locations. Second is the secondary hub, or a hub from where smaller cities or smaller regions are serviced. These are essentially smaller boxes, 50 to 100,000 square feet, and they service the customer for the orders which are placed to smaller centers. Third is the sort center. This is where most of the action happens. So orders which are fulfilled from the mother hub or the secondary hub all come to a sort center. From there, the PIN codes are sorted and deliveries are done by delivery boys. Last but not the least is the returns warehouse. That's again a controversial issue these days, given our taxation laws. People still really don't know whether there should be a returns warehouse or it should come back to where it was invoiced. However, it does make sense to have a returns warehouse, and then you sort out the item which is returned back to either the mother warehouse or the secondary hub. But you should always plan for something which is called as a returns hub. An interesting concept which has started developing over the last couple of years is what is called as an urban fulfillment center. Now, you would have always heard of fulfillment centers in warehouses, industrial buildings which are outside the city. But given the timeline to delivery, we are already talking of urban fulfillment centers, which are essentially fulfillment centers set up in office buildings. You do not put all your inventory there. What we are talking of is high value, low volume items which do not load up the floor space too much. But these items are essentially things like cell phones which you order and you get it in couple of hours. So urban fulfillment centers is going to be the next big thing in the e-commerce space. So start planning for an urban fulfillment center in your supply chain as well. That's about it. Any questions? I'm happy to take questions, if any.
Yes, I think somebody has a question. Yes, sir. Yes.
Any particular reason why you see Varanasi emerging as important instead of Lucknow?
We've also got requirements for Lucknow. However, Varanasi is an interesting destination because it not only fulfills Western UP, but it also caters to requirements from Bihar and Jharkhand as well.
Right, thanks.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Hang on a second, please be on stage. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a very big hand for that wonderful presentation, insightful.